Thank you guys for tuning in. We got our host Facey and Sydney from Migrant Money Australia.
We're trying to build this podcast for every first, second, and third generation immigrant in Australia. The goal of this podcast is short-term, we want to help any immigrant get started with investing and building wealth in this new country. And long-term, what is our goal, Sydney?
Long-term, we want to make sure that you're financially confident and teach the next generation about money.
Yeah. So our goal is to help as much or as little as we can, because when we came to Australia, we had none of this support and it was quite tough, obviously, coming into Australia. And we really want to have a community where we can share knowledge, share support, and really help each other.
And look, as an immigrant, we know our experiences have an added complexity. All right, new language, new culture, no friends, relatives to guide you, or actually a community to help you out, especially in tough times.
Yeah, for sure. So starting off, Sydney, tell us more about yourself.
All right, I'm Sydney. So nice to meet you all. 29 years old. I arrived in Australia in 2008 with my parents. I was born, I actually grew up in Nicaragua, so I speak Spanish. What about you, Facey?
Awesome. And myself, my name is Faizi. I'm 24 years old. I came to Australia in 2007 and I was born in Pakistan and I speak Urdu.
Oh, so how old were you when you came to Australia? So you were...
Yeah, I was about 8 years old, turning 9.
All right, so pretty young. So did you have any struggles when you actually arrived to Australia? Because technically you're an immigrant, I'm guessing your parents as well. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so coming into Australia, it was basically a whole mindset shift. It was a whole culture shift, like coming into a new country where everything is different. It was definitely quite tough because it's a new environment. I'd never seen such a diverse class before in school. Like over there, you go to school with just Pakistanis, but here it was a whole mix of everyone, especially in Western Sydney. So I came to school, spoke broken English, so it was hard to understand things, hard to communicate with teachers and kids. So it was quite tough. And of course, every single week, this teacher would come into my school and try to, teach me what was happening in class. A bit embarrassing, of course, because it felt that I wasn't good enough, but it is what it is. And it took about a couple of years to adjust to this new atmosphere where, everything is so different. So yeah, that's kind of...
Wait, so that means when you came here, you went straight to school?
Pretty much. So came here about 4 weeks where we were just applying for different schools, applications, and we got a spot. And then there I was going to school in year 4 and trying to basically fit in. And yeah, it was quite tough. But what about you, Sydney?
Yeah, because for me, when I came here, I was 15. And then I couldn't actually get into high school because I didn't know any English at all. So I had to go to ESL, so English Secondary Language School.
Yeah.
It was literally next to the high school, but all they did all day is teach you English. So that was a bit like an intensive course for, I think I remember 6 months that I had to go through. But luck in there for me is back home, I was in my actual last year of high school. Right. So I was already planning to go to uni and then do all that. Then we came here and then I had to actually go back and do year 10 because back home you finish in year 10. And then I had to do year 11 and 12 year.
Wow, okay.
That was a struggle because 6 months, intensive English. You learn, yes, read, write, speak. You know little from watching TV, movies, that sort of stuff, but it's nothing as in coming to a new country that actually just speaks.
Yeah.
And English 24/7. It's a huge difference. Yeah.
Especially because you're coming here and you're trying to speak Australian English. It's not like the movies, because I'm assuming you probably would have watched a lot of American stuff here and you come here and it's
the usual, always all the US TV shows, all the US movies. Yeah.
No, look, absolutely. So let's move on to the investing side of things, because this is the Migrant Money podcast. So how did you get started with investing, first of all?
I actually have a funky story there because typical, I was trying to make myself rich as quickly as possible because that's the way you invest, right? And unfortunately, I got onto one of those Forex trading applications and businesses. Back then, actually, I shouldn't even say the name. We might get in trouble. So yeah.
I think it's going to kill us.
So pretty much when I jumped on there, I just turned 18. So this was 3 years after I arrived in the country. Yeah. And then typical because trying to look for a job, trying to make money, pay bills, sort of stuff. And then unfortunately you fall for these sort of companies that just the ads are just awesome and just try and believe them. And the worst part in there was that got the account, 18 years old, had no money because I was still working part-time, trying to get my head around living in Australia. And pretty much they will offer, hey, I will lend you some money so you can start investing. So what did I do? I thought I was the smartest person alive, and then I took it.
Oh, no.
That led me to owe them almost 20K. And
Insane.
the next pretty much 3-4 years, it was me focusing on paying that back. If you didn't get the message, I blew pretty much my account. It was funny because I was actually making money. At one point, the account grew to 40K. I felt rich. I was like, I am making it. This is going to be my life from now on. But then all it takes is one bad day, and then you make a bad decision and you lose everything.
Pretty much.
What about you? How did you get started investing?
Yeah, so for me, when I was back in Pakistan, I would always hear my dad talk about stocks and the share market. And then when we moved here, I would still hear him talk about that. But instead of talking about Pakistani stocks, he would also talk about Aussie stocks. Now, at that time when I was growing up, I had no idea how the stock market actually worked, but I knew that you could make money from it, and it went up and down every day. So that's what kind of got me into it initially when I was growing up. And then once I went to uni, I started to realize, okay, this is something which you can use to really, build your wealth. But so basically that led me down to the path of starting to invest at the age of 19 when I was still in university. I remember I was sitting in a lecture room, still checking my stock app and seeing if I was up or down and trying to day trade in a lecture room. But really the main motivation was to really try to invest and build wealth so I can be financially independent and really help out my parents as well, because I've really seen how hard they've worked trying to come into this country, working 7 days a week, late nights, early mornings.
Bit of a personal question. What did your dad do back home?
So back then he was working as a chartered accountant, and that's basically what he did all his life. And actually the weird thing is, or the sad thing is, when he came to Australia, he could not practice accountancy here because he had to complete some more courses and more degrees, more stuff. And that really killed it.
I think that's a huge experience when you come to a new country.
Look, absolutely, yeah. It is very disappointing because all the effort that you did, all the stuff that you did, guess what? You got to do it again, which definitely sucks. But yeah, look, I saw how hard he was working, and I never wanted to be in that position. I feel like when I'm his age, I would like to be in a much better position, and I would like to really repay all the sacrifices that they've made. So that is a big reason of why I want to invest, and that's how I got started.
That's your dad. Just checking, do you have any siblings?
Yeah, so I've got 2 sisters.
So pretty much your dad decided to come to Australia with your mom and 3 kids on his back and decided to raise a whole family in a new country.
Pretty much. So back then my sister wasn't even born, my youngest sister. So it was just me and my other sister. And look, it's a very brave decision, leaving everything behind and coming to a completely new country where the culture is different. You speak a different language, you have no idea whether you will even get a job. And it's a huge sacrifice that people make. So yeah, look, I don't think I'll be able to make that sacrifice if I have kids and I'm moving to a completely different place. So it's a big props to my dad and obviously all immigrants that, do things like this. What about you?
For me, I'm an only child, so pretty much I came with mum and dad here. And yes, I know what you mean. Because when you come to a new country, especially them too, because I wasn't the only one that didn't know English.
Yeah.
They actually came here back in the 90s. So they were here for a couple of years. They learned the language. They were working. And then my dad met my mom here. They decided to actually, hey, look, let's save money. Let's go back home and save money and see what we do. So my dad went back home, and then he decided to, with the money that he saved with my mom, to open a business over there. So for a couple of years, we're doing well. And then the business was doing fine and everything was going well. No complaints. Growing up overseas, it was breeze life until I came to Australia. Because harsh reality here, when you migrate, even if you have a business over there, the reason why we came here is because the business, this bit went down.
Right.
Bad luck, bad management. Life happens. And Australia was going to be a new opportunity for me more than anything else. Because then they came here in the late 50s. So that is trying to get a job at that age here, especially when you move to another country, even if you live there, it's a huge and different experience.
100%. And just to just for my curiosity, what type of business were they running in like back home?
It was a supermarket.
Okay. Fair.
So funny thing. So it started as a supermarket. Then Dad decided to get into importing and exporting things. So pretty much bringing stuff from the US, selling them, make a bit of a margin in there. Nothing crazy, to be honest. At one stage, he was actually going to Miami, buying fridges and then getting them back home.
No way.
Yes, like industrial business, commercial, that sort of stuff. Because it's hard to get them. And pretty much just his own opportunity, try to take it. That was working out well for a couple of years. At one stage, we actually had a small restaurant.
Insane, yeah. So then obviously once they came here, it would have been extremely tough. So how did they end up finding a job, or what exactly happened in that transition period after coming to Australia?
They did. So pretty much the first couple of jobs that we were able to get here were in construction. I think that's a bit of a starting point, especially when you migrate to Australia, that the first thing you can actually get your hands on is a construction job.
It's the industry that Australia runs on. So yeah, fair call. Yep. And then you obviously were going back to school and trying to study and going to year 11 essentially when you came here?
Yeah, pretty much. So like I was saying, finished the English as a second language course, then jumped to the year 10, broken English, trying to do the subjects pass. I think my favorite subject back then, because I didn't have to speak or write anything in English back then, was math.
Wow. Yeah. And that would have been like a bit of an escape, because obviously you can just, because with maths, it's just
numbers.
Either you're right or you're wrong. There's no sort of pronunciation or grammar or any of that. So fair enough. Yeah.
All right. I think we're reaching probably the end of the podcast. Let's talk about any issues we had setting up around the podcast. What do you reckon?
Yeah. So when we first started this podcast, we actually had no idea how our headphones actually work. So we were speaking into the mic. The recordings were working fine, but we couldn't hear ourselves. And we actually spent, I don't know how long we spent, but I think it was at least 30 to 40 minutes, like just Googling on different websites, YouTube videos, trying to see what would work. And then what was the solution, Sydney? What were we doing wrong?
Someone forgot to check the volume.
Simple as that. So basically we got this device here, which you can probably see on camera, but got a lot of colorful buttons, and we forgot to click a simple button, which we now know that we have to press. So ever since then, we've been coasting along pretty well.
All right, let's go through the ending remarks. If you're new to Australia or you have been here for a bit of time, please reach out. We want it to be a community of immigrants willing to able to help each other.
Absolutely. And if any part of this podcast resonated with you, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really does help us quite a lot.
And lastly, follow us on social media, check out Patreon for exclusive content, and make sure you share us with friends and family.
Thank you for listening.